Welcome to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm Drew's co-host, entertainment writer Jim Hill, and he and I are recording this show on Tuesday, November 26, 2019, which is a couple of days after Frozen 2 has completed its first weekend in domestic release. So, 127 million in domestic ticket sales, which are interesting. A lot of entertainment writers are calling a real record breaker, but not Drew Taylor. And why is that, Drew?
Well, I just take issue with the fact that we are not including Jon Favreau's The Lion King as an animated film whose opening weekend was bigger. Mm-hmm. It made 191 million domestically. I think that we should include that. I mean, it is completely animated. There's no even performance capture in there. So I don't know why we're not including that in the list of animated films.
But what kind of muddies the water here? Isn't Disney itself grouping Jon Favreau's, photorealistic Lion King as a live-action film? I mean...
Yeah, they didn't submit it for the Best Animated Feature Oscar category this year, and they are calling it the live-action thing an aesthetic distinction, which... I guess that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There are certainly live action movies that you can describe as being very cartoony, so I guess that works. But yeah, it's very weird.
No, I agree. By the way, I finally got to see this movie on the plane down to Orlando last week, and I have to admit, it was impressive. I liked the fun little changes, like swapping out the Hawaiian war chant for "Be Our Guest" and beefing up Zazu's role, but that was largely because they had John Oliver in that part, right?
Yes, I thought he was great.
Don't get me wrong. It was good. I'm not entirely sure it was necessary. But face it, Disney has 1.65 billion reasons to disagree with me.
That's true.
But ironically enough, this makes me think of the Lady and the Tramp redo, that live action film that was one of the primary focuses of the initial promotional push for Disney Plus, the subscription streaming service.
Yeah.
But the company's grouping that also is a live-action film, which I get because it was, in fact, live-action. The CG was, just mostly used for mouth movements and the dogs?
Well, they actually swap out the dogs entirely for CGI models of the dogs. It's not like a Babe scenario where it's just moving the lips. They actually swap them out, which, if you didn't pick up on that, Jim, means that they really succeeded in their work there. Yeah.
Well, you see, this is the thing. I have not yet watched this, though.
Oh my God!
I'm sorry. I've seen The Mandalorian, all 3 chapters of that. I've seen all 3 chapters of Leslie Iwerks' amazing Imagineering story documentary series.
Ooh, I watched part 4 last night, Jim. Get ready for that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Can't wait. Meanwhile, back to Frozen 2. Nancy and I went on opening day. We went as civilians. Normally I try to catch an early press screening, but we were there on opening day. God help us, Drew, we were there for the 10:30 screening. What was fascinating about going to see this like a normal ticket-buying American is I then had to sit through the 8 trailers that ran in front of this thing. 6 of them were for animated films. There was one for a feature that features a lot of CG and a lot of effects work. Maybe you've heard of it. Rise of Skywalker.
Yep.
The only one that was primarily live action, totally live action, was the Little Woman remake that's coming out in December. I think you said you really, really enjoyed.
I loved it. It's really great. And we were, talking off air about how it was shot in Concord, Massachusetts, which was so close to where you were.
Yeah. My family literally lives one town over. In fact, that was what was so bizarre about sitting there watching the trailer going, I know that building.
Yeah, I was just there for a wedding, so it was very weird to see it on screen in olden times, even older than when you were there, Jim.
Yes, Old Man Hill. So, the interesting thing in the pile of trailers that they showed was the brand new Spies in Disguise trailer. And it's interesting, each trailer they do for this gets better and stronger. But But what fascinated me was in this particular trailer, Reba McEntire was all over this thing. You know, the character she voices, which I guess is Joy Jenkins, who is the head of the spy agency that Will Smith's Lance Sterling character works for. And,
right.
But again, which kind of fascinated me is that, you know, remember, mid-July was when they announced that they were bringing Reba McEntire in to, you know, in fact, I've been looking, I've been trying to get the name of the actress who originally voiced Joy Jenkins, and I can't find it. You know, this whole thing, you know, that she came in and had to do all this work inside of 6 months just reminded me of, you know, remember back in 2013, the whole, what, Despicable Me 2 thing where, what was it?
Yes.
6 weeks out from, no, excuse me, 2 months out from the release of that film in, I want to say July of 2013. Al Pacino, he'd been signed to voice Eduardo, the villain of that film, back in February of 2012, and there was some sort of falling out, and he was suddenly off the production. And here comes Benjamin Bratt, who you were saying, we were talking off air about this, that what's impressive about he came in and voiced all of that inside of 6 weeks, but he had to work to finished animation, right?
Yeah, he had to lip sync to the animation that was already finished, which is pretty amazing and speaks to his professionalism for him to get in there, get it done with such crazy limitations, and you can't really tell when you watch the final movie.
No, not at all. Not at all. And again, it's no disrespect to Ms. McEntire with her 6 months of work, but to do that in 6 weeks... You know, and I mean, to get it done in time to then have this thing ready to begin 2 weeks of press junketing and, you know, all of that stuff. It's like, I can't even begin to imagine. By the way, we were just talking about Will Smith and the voice work he does for Spies in Disguise, but we previously done, you know, talked on a couple of shows about Gemini Man, you know, that Paramount Pictures release that started off as a, you know, what? Decades ago at Disney, It was supposed to be this, you know, this cutting edge film that was going to show off what Disney's secret lab, that their in-house effects house was going to be able to accomplish. And again, we were talking off air about this, that nobody actually got to see this movie the way Ang Lee intended, right?
Yes, he intended it to be shown in 4K, 3D, 120 frames per second. And the closest you could get to seeing that was 2K, 120 frames per second, 3D, which was at one theater in Los Angeles, the Century City AMC. I did not get there. I don't believe the screening I was invited to was there. So it's just amazing that he made this movie in a way that no one could even watch properly. You know, I don't know. It's bizarre.
Well, that's the tough thing of trying to be a pioneer.
Well, he's hurting badly because of it, because, woo, boy.
Yeah, what it costs, that's, I understand it, this thing, it costs close to, what, $138 million to make, and only made $48 million during its entire domestic run. That's tough.
Yeah. Disney's probably saying, thank God we let that one slip away. Also, why would they hire the only actor who has not aged in 25 years? I will never understand that. But, you know.
That is an excellent point of view.
You know what I mean?
No, you're right. You're right. Okay. Well, while we're talking about the CG version of a young Will Smith, have you seen these stories about Finding Jack, that the Vietnam War era movie that they're looking to make with a CG version of James Dean?
Yes.
What are our thoughts about this?
You know, I think it's pretty ghoulish, but, you know, there have been things like this before. I mean, you and I were talking off the air about Roger Rabbit and how Robert Zemeckis did this amazing episode of Tales from the Crypt where he kind of brought back Humphrey Bogart. I bring this episode up a lot, and not a lot of people remember it, but it was pretty cutting edge at the time because he was sort of playing around with the technology that he used in Forrest Gump to bring back, you know, dead presidents and stuff like that. So I feel like that's in a different category, though, than what they're trying to do here, because it sounds like he's actually a co-star of this movie.
Yeah, but what's really bizarre, in fact, I'm going to recommend to folks, there's an article that LA Magazine did back in December 2004. It's called Grateful Dead. And do yourself a favor, Google this thing, chase it down, because it talks about the Curtis Management Group, CGM, which, according to this LA Magazine piece, is basically the William Morris Agency for dead people. At that time, they had the rights to 200 dead celebrities. And you have to imagine that it's got to be lots more people now. But again, it's interesting you bring up that, Zemeckis episode of Tales of the Crypt, because he would have had to have gone to CGM to license the right to Humphrey Bogart, because they had the rights from the Bogart family to Humphrey. Likewise, Marilyn Monroe, W.C. Fields, Bela Lugosi. And look, you're right. The phrase that a lot of people use in a situation like this is ghoulish. In fact, what was it when Rogue One, Star Wars story came out? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they had that CG version of Peter Cushing. It was cool to see Grand Moff Tarkin again, but on the other hand, it's just, Peter Cushing hasn't been with us for a long time.
Yeah, I feel like that was more of an ILM creation, though, too. I mean, there was some artistry into that character. It wasn't like it wasn't like a human being, photocopied into real life.
You and I both remember how they were talking about that at the time, and to remember, whenever you talk with anybody about the effects that we used for the Peter Cushing recreating, you learn more than you ever wanted to know about subsurface scattering. Just sort of like the notion of what it is that makes human skin look like human skin.
Oh my God! I mean, that reminds me. I sat through this presentation that almost put me to sleep about Gemini Man just a few months ago, where they were talking about how, because of the resolution levels, they had to make the skin even more believable and putting in pores and all this stuff. And it was like, oh my God, this is about as many people that listened to that talk went to see the movie, I guess. So, but, whatever.
You're so mean. But at the same time, okay, so it's a touch ghoulish, but I have to say, there are projects, never made films in Hollywood history, that I look to, and it's like, man, you could use what they did today with Will Smith to finally make those films. I mean, case in point, A Day at the United Nations. And this, again, as somebody who loves movie comedy, is a project that one of the more compelling what-if things I've ever come across. And basically the backstory here is, back in 1960, Billy Wilder is in New York City shooting The Apartment. And as he's shooting that darkly funny office romance with Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, and Fred McMurray, Wilder is living right across the street from the United Nations. And as he's walking back and forth to work each day, he's seeing all of these incredibly serious diplomats who are climbing in and out of limousines and, getting in each other's way. And they all look identical with their umbrellas and their hats and their dark overcoats. And Billy looks at this and is like, oh man, this setting is ripe for a satirical comedy. So one day he's on the set and he turns to his longtime writing partner, A.I.L. Diamond, and says, do you think it would be funny to set a film at the United Nations starring the Marx Brothers? And Diamond, who's this longtime fan of Harpo, Chico, and Groucho, loves this idea. So he and Billy quickly work up a 40-page treatment for a proposed feature film, which is supposed to be done in the style of the Marx Brothers classics, 1933, Duck Soup, and 1935's The Night at the Opera. They send the treatment to the Marx Brothers. Groucho loves it. Likewise, his two brothers, love the idea as well. So the project gets officially announced in November of 1960 as Billy's next movie. But then Harpo, who's 72 at the time, has a heart attack while he's rehearsing a TV special. And then while he's recovering, Chico, who'd been battling hardening of the arteries for years, passes away the following year in October of 1961 at the age of 74. And that's it. Once Chico's gone, there's really, no way to do, a Marx Brothers movie without Chico. So And so it never gets produced. It goes back into the files. But for me, to look at, what technology can do today, to look at a a young Will Smith with all of those realistic pores, there's a part of me, it's like, all right, maybe it'd be a little ghoulish, but I still want to see the Marx Brothers running around the UN, and
Right.
But I guess, again, to circle back to Finding Jack and this CG version of James Dean, I guess the real question here isn't necessarily can we do this, but should we do this?
Right.
But conversely, we just had that absolutely killer trailer for Call of the Wild Drop. And, I'm ready right now to give money to Fox. Again, this thing isn't even hitting theaters till February 21st of next year. But the dog in this thing looks great. And
yes.
But you, again, is this another Lady and the Tramp situation where we swap out real dogs for CG dogs?
No, the dog is completely CG in the movie, and it was actually performance captured on a dog called Buck, who looks which is amazing. Or Buck Lee, I think is the name of the dog, and the dog's name is Buck in the movie, and it looks exactly like this dog. It's so cute, and we need to tell people that this is the first live-action feature, mostly live-action feature, directed by Chris Sanders, who directed How to Train Your Dragon, The Croods, Lilo and Stitch, and before that was one of Disney's top story artists.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell a Chris Sanders storyboard instantly by looking at it. He did great work for Lion King and Beauty and the Beast and Mulan, and so it's very exciting to see him in live action, and the movie looks amazing.
I agree. I totally agree. I just cannot wait to see this project. That said, I'm kind of hoping, given that we've had a pretty steady streak here of Fox films released by Disney that haven't connected really with audiences yet, I'd really like to have this one break out, to be the one that gets through and connects an audience. Because again, it just looks tremendous.
If anybody can sell a movie about dogs, it's Disney, let's be honest. So
this is true. This is true.
Are you excited about Did you see the Pick of the Litter trailer too on Disney Plus about seeing eye dogs?
No.
Okay.
Now, you see, my plan is to sit down the day after Thanksgiving and just, all of this. I haven't seen Noelle yet.
Probably for the better, but
and likewise have not seen the Lady and the Tramp redo yet. But Pick of the Litter.
Yes, check out the trailer. It's not out yet, but I think it's out next month. But
okay.
Have you been watching the Forky Asks a Question short film
caught
series?
the What Is Money?
Okay.
But, again, haven't circled around to the new ones. Like I said, I got this podcasting I got to do. So
I know. Well, the new episode, they actually replaced Timothy Dalton as Mr. Pricklepants, which I think is the first Toy Story anything where he's not voicing the character, which was incredibly distracting, but it's a great episode. It's what is art is the question.
I am not happy to hear this.
No.
Well, all right. Speaking of the Disney side of the fence, Disney Channel just this past weekend during Star Wars Resistance ran a killer ad for Owl House. And by the way, did some research today, and I guess this Dana Terrace created animated series is going to officially debut on the Disney Channel on January 10th of next year. So can't wait to see that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Alex Hirsch is doing a voice for the show, right? Sure.
Yes, he voices the little demon with the skeleton head. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's not Grunkle Stan, but I'll take it. Okay, meanwhile, Cartoon Network went another way with their promotion of Infinity Train. I guess Book 2 of this animated anthology series is supposed to begin running on that cable channel sometime in 2020. But if you want to learn more about the continuation of this acclaimed series, you first have to go to the official Infinity Train website. You then must solve that site's new Claw Machine game, which debuted this past Friday, November 22nd. And only once you solve this puzzle do you then get to see the trailer for Book 2 of Infinity Train. And let me just say, is fine-tuning designated old fart. Yep, that's me, Old Man Hill. Look, making this the only way that I can see the trailer for the continuation of Infinity Train pretty much guarantees that I will never see this trailer. I mean, honestly, it's all I can do these days to remember my password for Netflix. Which
I'm sorry, Jim. I wish I was there to help you.
I just please, put something up in the fridge. It's something I write down to remember these things. By the way, speaking of Netflix, Drew, were you as surprised as I was last week when news broke about Shaun the Sheep Farmageddon?
Well, I wasn't as surprised as you, just because I know that Shaun the Sheep, the sequel, is coming out on Netflix, but it hasn't done a lot of business internationally. And Netflix and Aardman have a relationship. They've got a brand new Christmas special that's going to be on in 2020 that I'm very much looking forward to.
That's Robin, isn't it?
Robin, yeah, by a couple of younger Aardman animators. So, it made sense to me. I mean, I'm just happy we're going to finally see it. Everybody else has seen it, but America has been elusive. I mean, I think it's a much better option than just putting it on DVD and seeing it rot in some discount bin at Walmart or something, so.
I get that, but seriously, earlier this fall, I saw the trailer for Farmageddon while I was in a theater, and this was going to be opening this December in the States. And 3 days ago, or something at this point, 4 days ago, the news about this Netflix deal breaks and how it's now going to air early in 2020 on that subscription streaming service. And it's like, that's really close to the North American theatrical release. I mean, I would love to have been in the room when they made, the folks at Aardman made what had to be a really tough call.
Right. I mean, are you ready for it? Are you excited?
Well, again, I've always loved what Aardman does. I've been a fan of theirs since A Grand Day Out.
Even Flushed Away?
Well, I was lucky enough to get invited to DreamWorks Animation for an evening where they were showing off, a lot of the early footage that was done for Flushed Away. And that was when he had, the Hugh Jackman character had two. Do you remember the two little hamster butlers that lived with him?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there were whole, and this was finished animation. This was amazing stuff that. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you talk with the folks at Aardman about Flushed Away, and that was the film where Jeffrey Katzenberg really got involved and really started making story changes, and that's kind of why Crude Awakenings, the stop-motion Aardman version of that story, the one that John Cleese wrote, never got produced.
Yeah.
I mean, they chose to walk away rather than continue to work under conditions like that. So, yeah, I mean, Flushed Away has some fun stuff in it. I agree. It's worth it alone for the when the clownfish appears. Have you seen my mom? So,
yes.
All right. Anyway, to get back to Netflix, just this past weekend got to see Klaus, and I have wanted to see this hand-drawn film during the 1 week that Klaus was out in theaters, but it just wasn't possible up here in New England. Gotta say, it's kind of intriguing that Frozen 2 and Klaus basically arrive in the marketplace at almost the exact time, because there's a teeny tiny bit of overlap between these two productions. I mean, they both got magical snow effects, and there's some use of the same color palette. But I mean, what are your thoughts on Frozen 2?
I mean, I really liked it. I think we talked a little bit about it last time, but the story is pretty hard to untangle.
Yeah. I think you and I were talking off air about, if you remember from the very first teaser trailer, there are images, there's shots in that never showed up in the finished film. Like, for example, there's this one quick shot of a young boy who's basically being lifted aloft and sort of bounced in the air by leaves blowing around. So I'm assuming it's Gale, the wind spirit, so to speak. And there's also a little girl from the Enchanted Forest, or the Forbidden Wood, whatever they call it, and that sort of rang alongside the boy as he's being bounced through the air. So I have to assume that's the mom and that's the dad,
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't remember these images. I got to go back and watch it again.
And that trailer also ends with this really dramatic image of the camera's coming in quick behind Kristoff and Elsa and Anna, and as the camera gets in close, Anna just sort of reaches, I think grabs Kristoff's sword and just sort of turns and moves menacingly toward the camera. I mean, it's a really dramatic image, and you get that shot of Elsa breaking off an icy sword from those sculptures that are caused by water having memory. But I just get the sense that, as they got closer to the release date, there was a lot of story that didn't necessarily make sense or more to the point that seemed unnecessary. That's just sort of like, we don't really need to get into that. The visuals will carry us here, and let's face it, it's a beautiful looking movie.
Yeah, it's really stunning.
Yeah, solidly, well produced, and a genuinely ambitious sequel to the 2013 original. But when you talk about Disney, you have to talk about sort of the retail end of things. And the Wall Street Journal just ran an article on Saturday, which was talking about. The interesting thing is that Mattel had the rights to the original Frozen, and in fact, they got caught flat-footed. They weren't ready for when Frozen became a phenomenon. Whereas Hasbro got the contract for Disney's toys starting in 2016, and they have an 18-month-long program in place, Drew. The first wave of the stuff arrived in stores in October, and there is a plan going forward, all the way through to, I guess, when Frozen 2 finally shows up on Freeform. For
wow.
18 months there are plans in regard to which items hit store shelves and how they do so, and that in fact the very next window they're talking about in this article is when the movie becomes available digitally and what they'll be doing in stores to support that. On the other hand, I have to say that I've been prowling around my local Target and that sort of thing. I haven't seen anything for Klaus, and which is kind of a shame because it's a genuinely charming movie.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with the consumer products on that one. Mm-hmm. There is an Art of book, which I'm looking to pick up. But, there is nothing really else besides that, is there?
No, and in fact, the Klaus, the Art of the movie book, at least according to my notes here, that won't even show up till December 10th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is late, or at least as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I have never seen hand-drawn animation look like this before, and that coupled with a genuinely stellar voice cast. I mean, Jason Schwartzman is Jesper, J.K. Simmons is Klaus. By the way, what did you think of Rashida Jones as Alva, the school teacher?
I thought she was great, and I think it's really interesting that this comes out in the same year that her version of Toy Story 4 was supposed to come out.
There we go. I have to admit, when I saw that she was the voice of the school teacher, it's like, this is somebody I'd love to sit down with. Because again, remember, last year in the middle of John Lasseter being sort of disinvited to be at Disney, she came out and actually talked about leaving Pixar and made it very clear that, it wasn't related to anything necessarily that John had done, but it was more the culture that,
Yes.
the whole boys club thing up there.
And there's some great stuff about that in the in that Women of Animation book that just came out that you just sent me that we still need to talk about.
Which we still need to talk about.
Queens of Animation, yes. We will talk about that in future.
Okay, speaking of women in animation, got to say, I love Joan Cusack as Mrs. Crumb. Likewise, Will Sasso is Mr. Ellingbo. I missed his lemon vines. You ever see those?
Yes, they were insane.
They were. But I have to say, honestly, out of all the characters in this thing, I if I had to pick a favorite, it would really be tough to choose between either the little Sammy girl who's it's like a Mary Blair drawing brought to life. I mean, she's so
Yes.
amazing. Likewise, the Klaus character. I mean, I think you were talking about, how many animated things have we seen with Santa Claus, and we've never seen a design like this before.
No, it's an amazing design. Just his dimensionality. They did something with the eyes of these characters that's really interesting, where they're either CG or they have some kind of CG sheen on them, but you always see the kind of light in the characters' eyes. It's really amazing. Like Sergio Pablos, we have to talk about him.
Yeah,
what he's done.
I've been a huge fan of him since Doppler.
Yeah, he worked on a bunch of Disney animated movies. He's also like this incredible story guy who came up with the story for Despicable Me and Smallfoot, and he's just like this unsung hero in animation. And as you pointed, out, the Doppler, the Jason Schwartzman character looks a lot like Doppler.
To me, that's actually a strength, not a weakness. I love that animation. But speaking of which, again, it's a great script. I mean, face it, we've had a lot of Santa Claus origin stories over the years, and I don't want to give too much away here, but Sergio made a really ballsy choice when it came to Klaus's origin story. I think it really deepens the character. I think it really makes the film story that much more meaningful, that much more emotional. But at the same time, the humor in this thing is so outrageous at times, like the battle bell, the ongoing feud in Schmeringsburg or whatever it's called.
It's a lot darker than I expected. And I haven't seen the new Addams Family. And did you actually go see it?
I have my Art of book. I have not seen the movie.
But it felt like some very Charles Addams kind of humor with the warring kind of sides of the city.
But my other favorite character out of this thing is Mogens, the ferryman that Norm Macdonald voices. That is such a great character, and how he's constantly commenting in the action or clearly enjoying inciting, what poor Jesper is about to go through.
Yeah, he's great.
He's absolutely great. All right, well, tell you what, folks, seriously, if you are looking for something genuinely fun to do with the family after Thanksgiving dinner, I could think of nothing better than firing up Netflix and then, sitting down and watching Klaus. And speaking of Thanksgiving, when Drew and I get back from this break, we're going to talk about how going to see animated films, over the long Thanksgiving weekend became a thing here in the States.
Optimism isn't sunshine and rainbows. It's fixing things, changing the way we fix things. It's running the world on smarter energy. Because if optimism never stops, then change can't either. GE Vernova, the energy of change.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
And we're back. Okay, we were going to talk animation, Thanksgiving, which is kind of ironic because, to be honest, Frozen 2 actually deviated from what has now become the historic pattern for Walt Disney Animation Studios in regard to its releases. The studio decided to put its newest animated feature out literally the week before Thanksgiving. And why did they do this with this new Jennifer Lee Chris Buck movie? Wall Street Journal ran a story on this topic yesterday. And here's the crucial quote. Frozen 2 will likely enjoy robust earnings again next weekend. And remember, we talked about at the top of the show how it made $127 million during its first weekend of domestic release. And this is because when schools are out over Thanksgiving break, said Catherine Taff, the Disney's head of distribution. The studio decided to forego opening the sequel over the holiday weekend as it did with the original. Putting it out one weekend ahead was pretty strategic, so we could then get the whole week of Thanksgiving. If you look back over the history of Walt Disney Animation, particularly over, the last decade, starting with Wreck-It Ralph in 2012. November has been the month that Disney, has taken for its animated features. Some they've opened earlier. Wreck-It Ralph was November 2nd. Likewise, Big Hero 6 was November 7th. But typically it is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. That's when they release Frozen, Moana, Ralph Breaks the Internet. And looking ahead to 2020 and beyond, I mean, literally, Raya and the Last Dragon is scheduled to come out on November 25th, 2020. And then it's literally like a countdown clock for the next 3 years. It's November 24th, 2021, November 23rd, 2022, November 22nd, 2023. But on the other hand, Pixar has locked in the end of school, beginning of summer vacation spot. And that started in 2006 with Cars, and from Ratatouille right through to Toy Story 4. Again, they were all basically in that the third weekend of June, right after school is let out. In fact, the only two movies from Pixar over the last couple of years that have deviated from this. We had The Good Dinosaur in November of 2015, and we had Coco, which also came out in November of 2017. But remember, Drew, it wasn't all that long ago that Pixar owned Thanksgiving. I mean, what was it? Toy Story came out for Thanksgiving of 1995. Bug's Life came out, again, Thanksgiving 1998. And then Toy Story 2, November of 99, and then Monsters, Inc., November of 2001. So how did Disney and Pixar wind up switching spots? The interesting part of this story is sort of boardroom stuff. Do you remember back in, that was 2002? Steve Jobs started to make noise about how he wanted, I guess Disney and Pixar were coming to the end of their 7-picture deal, and that if Pixar was going to renew with Disney, they wanted basically the deal that George Lucas had with 20th Century Fox for the prequels, which meant that Disney would only get a distribution fee from the Pixar movies, and that Pixar would keep all of the profits. And Eisner hated this idea, but he thought he had a way to sort of put Steve Jobs, sort of rock him back on his heels. And that was because at this point, Finding Nemo was in kind of rough shape. This was still during the version of the film when Andrew Stanton, it was all, these sort of like post-traumatic stress flashbacks of Marlin, where you'd get little snippets of the Barracuda attack and his wife disappearing and that sort of thing. It was only 2/3 of the way through the movie you learned what happened to his family.
Yeah, and Stanton went back to this horrible idea for John Carter because you don't really know what happens to his family until about 2/3 of the way through the movie. I think it's handled sort of interestingly in John Carter. I'm a big fan of that movie, but it's just interesting that he returned to that idea. It didn't work in one movie, but by God, he was going to get it through to another one.
Yeah, well, but what's interesting is Eisner is convinced at this point that Nemo is going to be the first Pixar film to misfire. So he basically lays a trap. It's like, hey, how about with Nemo we do something different? Rather than we put this one out at Thanksgiving, why don't we put it out during the summer? It's a movie that's in the ocean, which is close to the beach, and people go to the beach during the summer. And so he gets Pixar on board with the idea of switching out of their comfort zone, that Thanksgiving slot, and going with a May 2003 release. And meanwhile, here's what Eisner, after he convinces Pixar to do this, here's what he says to the Disney board in a memo. Yesterday, we saw that for the second time, the new Pixar movie, Finding Nemo, that comes out next May. This will be a reality check for those guys. It's okay, but nowhere near as good as their previous films. Of course, they think it's great. And, Eisner's thinking was that Nemo comes out, underperforms at the box office, Entertainment press will be all over Pixar talking about their first flop. Jobs will suddenly get nervous, and that will put Disney in a much better negotiating position when it comes time to renew or redo the Pixar deal when Film 8 comes along. The only downside to Eisner's plan is Andrew Stanton and company actually fixed, Finding Nemo. Wasn't this when they swapped out Bill Macy for Marlin's voice and brought in Albert Brooks?
Yes, I think the version Eisner is referring to in that memo is the Bill Macy version.
And more to the point, they take all of those post-traumatic stress flashbacks and just let's start the story. The first 5 minutes. Let's get this story all out of the way. And you have to say that this is what a good editor can do. A good editor can turn a film around it can have the vision, can have the eye, can figure out how to really make a good movie. And speaking of which, was at my local Barnes & Noble yesterday and picked up a copy of this absolutely amazing book. It's called A Long Time Ago in a Cutting Room Far, Far Away. This is Paul Hirsch's memoir, and the subtitle alone makes you want to buy the book. My 50 Years Editing Hollywood Hits, Star Wars, Carrie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Mission Impossible, and more. Now, Drew, you've actually had the opportunity to talk with Paul a couple of times now, because he's come on your great Mission Impossible podcast, Light the Fuse.
Yes, and we're going to go see him again this week, and I can't recommend this book enough. And for animation lovers, you're going to get a lot out of it. You were just talking about Gemini Man, and he actually talks about the secret lab and about how they were falling behind on a couple of the things that he worked on, and ILM ended up coming and saving the day, both on Mission to Mars and Mighty Joe Young. So it's really interesting, and I can't recommend the book enough, so definitely go check it out.
Oh, no, absolutely. And just the Star Wars stuff, and there's so much stuff that he personally brought to the table. Like, I love the story in there where George is talking with him about, oh, by the way, what do you think of the lightsabers? I'm thinking of making, Luke's red, and I'm thinking of making Darth Vader's blue, and it's actually Paul who comes up. Well, in Christian iconography, if we're talking Christ-like figures, that they're traditionally done in blue colors, and more earthly, characters are done in red. And so literally George takes that information and goes, oh, okay, so Darth Vader's, lightsaber will be red and Luke's will be blue. And I mean, it's just, there are so many great stories in this thing.
Yeah. I mean, for a guy who worked with Brian De Palma 11 times. I mean, it's amazing. It's really an amazing story.
Well, the fact that he's above ground after work.
Yes, that's true. He worked with a lot of, hotheads.
Oh,
and people,
yeah.
Some great stories about John Hughes.
I was about to say. And I love how he solved the puzzle of planes, trains, and automobiles.
You mean by fixing the ending, or by the fact that he shaved off an hour and a half from the 3 hour and 45-minute long running time?
Well, there's that, but there's that great story where he talks about looking at hours of footage of Steve Martin looking at a train window and the different faces that Steve makes, and eventually how he figures to use that to completely restructure the end of the movie. No, again, I'm sorry, we're getting off topic here.
We're getting off topic, but it's an amazing book.
It's an amazing book.
Did you read this who thing in one night, Jim? I just talked to you yesterday when you got the book.
Well, no, it's that good. I mean, it really, seriously, I devoured this thing, and just amazing stories. But
yeah.
Anyway, okay, so Finding Nemo comes out. It's the biggest hit Pixar's ever had, and it totally blows up in Michael Eisner's face. And let's be honest, 2003 was not Michael's greatest year anyway. That was the year when the share, he got that 43% no confidence vote at the shareholders meeting in Philadelphia. And
yeah, you weren't involved in that at all, were you, Jim?
That's a story for another time.
Okay.
But anyway, long story short, Michael has to give up his title as chairman. He steps down as head of the Walt Disney Company in September of 2005. And Just 4 months later, here's Disney buying Pixar Animation Studios outright for $7.4 billion. And interestingly enough, one of the terms that Steve Jobs set as part of this acquisition was that Pixar from here on in gets its pick of release dates. And Nemo made a third more than either of the Pixar films that were released on either side of it. And we're talking Monsters, Inc., and we're talking Incredibles. So he was like, oh, all right, that's it. We take the summer slot. And so Disney, winds up getting forced back, and it's not their choice. They end up defaulting with Thanksgiving. And the irony is just, you take a step back a couple of years and here's Disney so fiercely fighting to protect the Thanksgiving release date. Do you remember in '97 when Fox was getting ready to put Anastasia out in theaters and Disney suddenly announced, hey, limited re-release of The Little Mermaid, only going to be out in theaters for 17 days. And coincidentally, those 17 days were a week before Anastasia opened and then the first 10 days that 20th Century Fox animated film was out in theaters. So they effectively drained the box office of, I want to say, $38 million that would have obviously gone into Anastasia's coffers. That was back when Disney, it got mean, it got personal. The second Golden Age films, came out for Thanksgiving. It was Little Mermaid at 89, Rescuers Down Under, which I still like a lot, in 1990, and then, of course, Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin. In fact, if all had gone according to plan, the original hand-drawn version of Lion King was supposed to have come out in theaters for Thanksgiving of 1993. But Drew, from having talked to all those folks who worked on the original Lion King, all of the story problems they were having with that one. I mean, they literally had to push the release off to the summer of '94 because it just wasn't ready, for the Thanksgiving of 1993. And then of course the irony is, it comes out summer of '94, it makes all of this money, and suddenly here's Disney. Well, okay, let's put all of our animated features out in the summer months during summer blockbuster season, and here's poor Mark Gabriel and Eric Goldberg who are making Pocahontas with an eye toward this is going to be the ultimate Disney Thanksgiving movie. Do we have, settlers coming to the New World, interacting with, Native Americans, and, this wonderful fall color palette of swirling leaves and that sort of thing. And, that's the window they're aiming at. And it's like, nope, you're going to be out in theaters summer of 1995. So...
but why were the animated movies in the 70s and 80s so important to be at Thanksgiving?
If we're talking about things like Rescuers Down Under, this is the early days of the summer blockbuster, and I got to get this right, folks. The last time I told this story, I got it wrong. Okay, so... All right, so it's, what is it? It's late June, early July of 1975, and Jaws comes out. First film to sell $100 million worth of tickets, and again, that gets everybody's attention, but it's like, okay, so, but is it that, a one-time thing, or are people accidentally tripped over a gold mine, that this is an interesting place that you can release a film? So jump ahead now to June of 1976, and we have 20th Century Fox, and they have the very first film of the Omen series. And they're like, well, when should we release this? And it's like, well, Universal put out a scary movie, in June of last year, and it seemed to do well. And so let's try that. And so that's what they do. They put out Omen in June of 1976, and it does $48 million, which isn't $100 million, but that's still a lot of money. And so this puts that release weekend on the map. And okay, now we jump to June of 77. And again, this is what I love. In fact, there is, I have to read this quote out of Paul's book. There is this wonderful thing where he talks about the original Star Wars and his expectations for the movie. He's working with Paul to cut the movie together. And he says, look, this is basically a Disney movie. And those movies always make $16 million. You can look it up. The picture is going to cost $10 million to make, so it won't turn a profit. But we can actually make some money if we sell some toys based on the characters. That's George Lucas looking at Star Wars and figuring, I have bet on the wrong horse. This is never going to work. And 20th Century Fox felt the exact same way. They were looking at this film, and they're like, and they had another film that they were prepping for the summer of 77. It was a film version of Sidney Sheldon's The Other Side of Midnight. And it's like, geez. Okay, tell you what, let's get George's movie out of the way. Let's release that in late May. Then we'll put that out for the Memorial Day weekend. And, and they only put it out initially in 32 theaters, Drew. And then...
Insane.
And then like 3 weeks later, they put The Other Side of Midnight out, figuring that at this point, Star Wars will have fallen out of the box office. The 32 theaters will be available for The Other Side of Midnight. And here's Disney, just noticing that, okay, look at the money that Jaws made with that release date in 75, and look at the money that Omen made in that exact same release slot in 1976, and nobody's going for it. So, geez, let's drop Rescuers in there in that exact same slot in 77. And that, in turn, became... Up until we started getting the second Golden Age movies from Disney, that was the highest grossing new animated film that Disney had made in decades. It made $40 million domestic. And in fact, that's why when Eisner came through the door, he said, look, we're going to start off running Disney by Paramount rules. So, what we do at Paramount is if you have a hit film, you make a sequel. So, what's your highest grossing live action film? And it's like, well, Mr. Eisner, that would be Mary Poppins. And it's like, okay, get started on Mary Poppins sequel. Only took them to 2018, but they got it made, Drew. On the other hand, what's our highest grossing animated film? Well, that would be The Rescuers Down Under. And it's like, well, tell you what, over at Paramount, we just did Crocodile Dundee. Why don't we send those characters to Australia? And that's how we got The Rescuers Down Under. But yeah, it's just it was honestly like the one thing that Ron Miller kind of did, that kind of recognized what was going on in the marketplace. And it's like, that weekend, let's go for that weekend. And in fact, the irony is that if we jump ahead to 81, this is the slot that The Fox and the Hound ended up in. But to be realistic, Drew, that was a movie that was originally supposed to come out for Christmas. But when Don Bluth walked out the door and took, half of the animation staff with him in 79, they were like, there's no way we're making Christmas of 1980. You're going to have to push this thing at least 6 months. And that's how Fox and the Hound wound up in theaters in July of 81. So, anyway, long story short, folks, again, there are a myriad of reasons why Disney initially was releasing all of its animated features on Thanksgiving until, Pixar got that slot, and then Pixar, wrestled that away after the acquisition in 2006. And, that's why they are so aggressively hanging on to that slot going forward. I have to ask, though, Drew, looking ahead to the fact that it's 2000, it's next year, 2020, and then again in 2022, right? That Pixar's doing 2 films a year, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. They are releasing more movies, I think, in the next 4 years between Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios than they have, I think, the previous 8 or something. There are so many movies coming out. But yeah, next year, Onward in March and Soul in June, which is really nuts that they're both in the same season, essentially.
Yeah.
It'll be very interesting to see. It's sort of like it's like a Marvel release schedule where you have, Captain Marvel in February or March, and then you have an Endgame in June or May, and it's just crazy.
No, I agree.
I don't know.
And I have to say, looking at Disney Plus and this new schedule, which was announced with the most recent earnings call, it goes all the way to 2023, which I think ends with the release of Avatar 3. I gotta wonder, given what Netflix is doing, things like the Irishman, and which, by the way, that's also part of my Thanksgiving plan. My brother Peter and I will sit down and watch that at some point. But I just have to wonder, how much of this is whistling in the dark? By 2023, with so many films, things like The Mandalorian, that's appointment television now. Is it still going to be realistic for Disney to have, a release schedule, where there's 20 or more films going out, Marvel and Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios and all of the Fox projects. Just this past week, going to see Frozen at 10:30 in the morning in my local cinema with the leather seats that go up and all that. I was sitting there in a half full theater, and this was Disney's most heavily promoted animated film in years. And the first screening, I'm looking at a half empty theater. It still did great numbers, but I just got to wonder, especially. This sort of historic pattern, the why would you pay money to go out to the theater to see Frozen 2 when, to be honest, you can fire up Netflix and see an animated film like Klaus that's as good, if not better?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be made, Jim. So, yeah. So it's a whole new world.
No, I agree. But again, on the other hand, if you want to look back at, again, some amazing Hollywood history, seriously, folks, I cannot say enough good things about Paul Hirsch's memoir. And are you going to get to talk with him for your next?
Yeah, we're going over tomorrow. Yeah, so those episodes will air in December probably. But yeah. We've got a lot of stuff cooking.
And by the way, I want to clarify something here. I keep talking about Light the Fuse as if it's a show you do as a solo by yourself, and you don't. You do it with two other really talented, fun guys.
Well, I do it with Charles Hood, who is my co-host, and he has a movie coming out on Hulu in December, so watch that. It's part of the Blumhouse Into the Dark series, where they do a movie based on the holiday of that month. So he got to do a really fun Christmas movie. And he's great. I've known him for years, and we're both absolutely fanatical. And we bring on guests. We try to bring on guests almost every week. So, we've got some good stuff cooking.
Well, again, that's I'm definitely, based on this book, I got to circle back on those interviews you've done previously with Paul. You were just talking about some of the great stories he has about Brad Bird, his work on Ghost Protocol. But yeah, seriously, folks, go. Get a copy of Paul's book. More to the point, go listen to Drew's Light the Fuse podcast. And we also do some other podcasts here at Jim Hill Media. We got Disney Dish with Len Testo. We got Marvel Us Disney, which I do with Aaron Adams. We just recorded a new version of that today. We've got Universal's Joint with Dustin Fuse. We've got Looking at Lucasfilm with Dan Zayer. And I Want That with Michelle Valladolid. We're going to go do our big Christmas shopping, Christmas list show, which more than likely will include the Queens of Animation. And again, Paul's great book here. And I guess that's it for right now. So I tell you what, folks, if you could do Drew and I a favor, head over to iTunes and not only rate and recommend, find Tooning, but also Light the Fuse. And if you really, really, really like what we do here, if you get out to Bandcamp and subscribe, that would be incredibly helpful. And I guess that's it for now, Drew. So you and Katie up to anything fun for Thanksgiving? Or
no, we're just hanging around. We're supposed to rain in LA. I know, it's shocking. So we're just going to sit around. She hasn't seen The Irishman yet, which is on Netflix this week, and it also has amazing de-aging visual effects courtesy of ILM that are pretty seamless. I'm curious as to what you'll think, Jim, but it's a wonderful film, so be sure to check it out.
All right. Well, undoubtedly, we'll talk about that at our next Fine Tuning, which, of course, has nothing to do with animation. But I think you folks are used to that at this point. So anyway, thanks for listening, and Drew and I will be back soon.